Hello, and welcome to Legalbytes. If you're new here, my name is Alita. I'm a lawyer licensed in California and DC, and on this channel, we explain the law one bite at a time. We don't give legal advice, but we do talk about how the law works and try to look into our crystal ball to see how things might turn out. If you're enjoying this on YouTube, we'd love it if you could like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it with friends, all the great YouTube-y stuff. And if you want to listen while out and about, we're now offering our live streams in podcast form where you can leave a rating and review. Links are in the description below, as well as to our clips channel where you can find some of the best clips taken from our live streams. Otherwise, if you want to catch me elsewhere, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And if you want to support the channel, you can do so on Locals, Patreon, or by becoming a YouTube member, or by buying some really awesome Legalbytes merch. Again, all links are in the description below. And with that said, let's get into it.
Great intro. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
Wow. Marvelous introduction.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's fun. I like the music because it kind of pumps me up a little bit before we get started. I'm kind of dancing to it. So,
right.
So it's always good. Thank you so
how
much
you got
for
that
joining
footage
me.
of me jumping into the pool? I didn't even know you had that. That was great.
So welcome, Mark Groubert. It's Groubert, right? Not Groubert.
Yeah.
I saw that in one of your live streams with Eric Hunley on America's Untold Stories. If anybody is not familiar with Mr. Groubert, right?
Right.
Okay. So you have just by way of introduction, you have a channel with Eric Hunley on YouTube called America's Untold Stories. You are also an investigative reporter, and you've lived about 5,000 lives from what it sounds like. So what else is there?
Well, no, I've been in Hollywood and I've covered the Dodgers. More importantly, for this show, I was a writer at the LA Weekly and covered the Dodgers peripherally. Now, it wasn't my main beat. My main beat was something else. And then I became a columnist for a local paper here with a weekly column called Dodger Confidential, which was an inside weekly look at the Dodgers. And I've been a lifelong fan, and I love the sport. And it's almost opening day, Alita, so we have to get ready.
Perfect.
But yeah, it's kind of perfect. I was thinking about. I was so busy. I'm kind of missing opening day, but we're not there yet because of the lockout. So I think it's April 15th.
Yeah. So, although they still are having their usual preseason games. So I think they played at Angel Stadium yesterday. I was really trying.
Don't tell me I TiVo'd it. Don't tell me. What happened.
I don't know what happened either.
Oh, okay.
Because my family, we were planning on going because for anyone that usually watches the channel, yes, my background is entirely different than it normally is. And I also apologize for the lighting. I haven't gotten my lighting situation set up yet. I literally just flew in to Southern California last night from overseas. And so, I'm at my parents' house right now, live streaming, and they have assured me that they can be quiet while they are getting their breakfast ready. But yeah, so we were going to try to make the game last night, but just the timing with my flying in, it just wasn't going to work out. With just sort of like hop, skipping, and jumping over to Angel Stadium to see it. But
which is a great stadium, by the way. I love going to games down there.
It is great. But it's not quite Chavez Ravine, though. I still love Chavez.
No,
Ravine.
It's not Chavez Ravine, but even Chavez Ravine's not Chavez Ravine anymore. So
well, yeah, I suppose so. But yeah, and by the way, for people that are, you might be listening on the podcast version after this is recorded, but for anybody watching, you can obviously see that we are both wearing Dodgers gear. This was not planned.
No, I just don't. Right. No, I'm trying to get in the mood, Alita. Trying to get ready for opening day.
It feels appropriate, right?
Right. I don't know. It feels normal to me. This is how I go to a game.
Yeah, exactly. So we are talking about, if you're watching this, of course, we are talking about Trevor Bauer, Dodgers pitcher, who was just he had just been traded, I think, last season, right?
Well, no, he signed as a free agent with the Dodgers.
Or he signed as a free agent. Sorry, that's right.
Cincinnati won the National League Cy Young Award and then signed as the highest player in the history of baseball for 1 year. It's a multi-year deal, but it was $40 million for the first year to the Dodgers, and then all hell broke loose.
Yes, of course. And that is in the complaint as well. And we are going to get into the details of the complaint, and also sort of the context around it, which is what Mark can definitely help out with,
Right.
as somebody who has written about the Dodgers, and who is sort of plugged into a lot of this kind of stuff. So this will be great. I'm really excited to have you here,
Thank you.
and yeah, like I said, I've seen you on America's Untold Stories, so I'm really happy to have you on.
Yeah, we have an America's Untold Story, which I think you put as a link below, about Alabama
Yes.
Pitts. And the reason Alabama Pitts is relevant is that this player was a player in Sing Sing prison. And in 1935, the Yankees came in to play in Sing Sing prison. And eventually, Alabama Pitts was paroled and ended up playing for the minor league Yankees up in Albany. And before, it's an amazing story if anybody wants to check out the legend of Alabama Pitts.
That is amazing.
In prison for armed robbery in Sing Sing in upstate New York. The warden brings in the 1933 World Championship Yankees with Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig and everybody you've ever heard of into Sing Sing prison to play the Sing Sing All-Stars, known as the Black Sheep. And in that game, Babe Ruth and the others saw how great of a player Alabama Pitts was. Alabama Pitts gets paroled and gets signed by the Yankees up in Albany, and is banned from baseball and not allowed to play because of his convict criminal background. And the entire country goes berserk, including the Sporting News out of St. Louis. And eventually, Kennesaw Mountain Landis, the famous judge who later became commissioner of baseball, changes the ruling and allows him to play baseball.
Wow.
And the reason that's important is because there were later other players for the White Sox who in the 70s who got out of prison, and baseball now had the groundwork, the legal groundwork, to allow ex-cons to play baseball.
Wow.
Now, right. Now, the reason that's important, Alita, is because this has progressed so far and reversed itself now, where the morality clause in their contracts has been to not about serving time in prison, but just any immorality that MLB decides is immoral, which is where we are now with Trevor Bauer.
Yeah.
He could be cleared. He can have the DA Gasson not pursue him here in Los Angeles, which is true. He could be vindicated in court, but MLB, in a 360-degree change, has now reversed its centuries-long policy, because it was in 1933 that this happened, where now any immorality, anything they perceive to be immoral, can ban you from baseball for life.
Yeah, which that's something that has come up a few times on this channel. We haven't really dug too deep into it, but morality clauses are always something that have sort of made me uneasy if I were somebody contracting that was subject to a morality clause, because if you don't define that term properly, it's the definition is in the eye of the beholder.
Right.
Essentially.
I mean, it just leaves you wide open for anything, of a contractual nature.
Yeah.
They could ban you. I mean, we had a guy on the Dodgers, Julio Urias, we still do, a great little pitcher from Mexico.
Yes.
And he was in a fight with his girlfriend. The two of them are literally like teenagers. He was like 21, and they're having an argument in the Beverly Center in the parking lot. Somebody films it. The two of them are shoving each other. He gets sentenced to she doesn't press any charges against him. Jackie Lacey sentences him to anger management, which he's sitting there. He doesn't speak a word of English, has to go every week to anger management. The Dodgers say, all right, whatever. And he's now sentenced to this thing for a squabble with his girlfriend in a parking lot that's filmed by some fans. And because of the morality clause, he's got no choice, no obligation. He just keeps going to anger management. And, he's still on the Dodgers now. I don't know what the status of Trevor Bauer is, but just another example of this thing.
Yeah, and he was, so my understanding is that Trevor Bauer right now is, where do I have notes on this? So he's on administrative leave by the MLB, and he's technically with the Dodgers, but he's not starting the Dodgers during or he's not playing with the Dodgers during spring training. His administrative leave has been extended at least 9 times. An
Mhm.
article that I read was that it had been extended 9 times. I don't know if it's been extended since then, which I think kind of speaks to probably the timing of this defamation lawsuit, that he probably figured, okay, enough is enough. I've been waiting around for this. And if you guys aren't going to make a decision, I'm going to at least do something proactive. You know, if it's not enough that the court and the DA have come to my side of the facts on this, maybe I need to go and clear my name, you know, in a court of law on this issue.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if Gascon, I mean, one of the most, protective DAs in the history of Los Angeles, and these types of cases, he said he couldn't find anything there. The judge in the case, if you looked at the transcripts of the actual hearing, the judge in the case said there ought to be a restraining order against you, the woman, in this case. That's what she said from the bench. And
So
and
wow.
I mean, she castigated her from the bench. I mean,
Yeah.
I've never heard such language. A female judge with a female, defendant here. But I mean, one of the great lawyers in this case is Holly. I think her name is Sean Holly from Kinsella, who defended and shredded the witness on the stand, by the way, in the hearing, which was a hearing, just so people at home know, it was a hearing for the extension of her restraining order. That's what the hearing was about.
Right.
And that was resolved. And then the DA dragged his feet until, February, just recently, Alita, to finally clear him. But
Yes.
MLB, I mean, 9 times extending this, now saying, okay, we're going to investigate this now. I mean, if not now, when?
Yeah.
What are you going to do? You have special investigative skills because you are baseball league? I don't understand. Who is their investigative team that they refuse to name, by the way, over the years? They don't say who these guys are, but they're supposedly crack investigators that resolve these matters.
Yeah. So, and well, when it comes to these kinds of allegations I want to say in the workplace, technically this isn't an allegation that was made in the workplace, but it implicates somebody's work. You can have a work related investigation that happens. I mean, if this were an allegation between 2 employees, the employer would have to investigate, and have some sort of either an in-house investigation or more likely a third party neutral investigator to make sure that there's no retaliation, to make sure that they
Right.
get to the bottom of things. But it is the fact that they've delayed investigating on top of everything is also, it at the very least raises questions, right? Like what is the delay here?
I don't know.
Why?
Yeah, why?
Other than that he is kind of a disfavored person because of his mean tweets.
Well, he disputes that. I mean, if you look at his lawsuit, he disputes that, and he says, "Show me the mean tweets." Every time through the lawsuit, he says, "Show me where I said this. Show me where I harassed women in my tweeting." And they produce none of it. None of the articles written about him, Molly Knight, and none of the others ever produce anything that they allege that he did. And getting into the weeds of the story, the woman who Miss Hill is an employee and was an employee. I don't know if your audience realizes that or you realize that she worked for the Padres. She was one of the ambassadors of the Padres and bragged about doing the same thing to 2 Padres players, one Fernando Tatis Jr. and the other Mike Clevenger, a pitcher for the Padres.
Oh,
so
wow.
she was fired by the Padres during the middle of this. So you do have some sort of connection to a workplace, Alita.
Yeah. Okay. So that's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, just to add some minor details.
Yeah.
To the case.
No.
It's not as cut and dry as people think this case.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure. I mean, because when you first hear about it, you're like, ooh, these are some nasty allegations about him.
Right.
That he's so it, and I guess I probably should have given a bit more context for anybody that's kind of new to this story. So what happened was that there was an allegation that came out on June 28th, 2021, a woman came forward and filed a domestic violence restraining order against Trevor Bauer, claiming that they had, let's just say, intimate relations and that they were particularly violent and that she ended up with injuries. And along with that, she had to file an attached declaration where she gave her whole story. And then along with that, she also attached as exhibits her medical records that included an MRI, a CT scan, etc. Now, the CT scan very conclusively showed she had no skull fracture, and yet she
Right.
was claiming she had a skull fracture.
Right.
So the basis of her restraining order petition was basically this set of medical records, et cetera. And so the court basically came back and said, after the hearing, they said, okay, look, it looks like based on everything that we have heard in this case, through testimony, through the records, through everything, you consented to everything. You weren't injured. And on top of that, we have seen your tweets to your friends where you have bragged to your friends about how not only were you excited about the attention to yourself for this, and also on top of that, you are excited to take down somebody such as Trevor Bauer. So like, no, no, go away.
Right. Right.
So, but the reporting on that ignored all of the court's findings. And so that's sort of the basis of this defamation case, is that he says the articles coming out by The Athletic, which they were the first ones to report on it, and then Sports Illustrated and other journal outlets, they basically repeated the story based on what The Athletic had reported. They reported that she filed for a domestic violence restraining order, she had all these medical records, and she has a fractured skull. But they had the petition along with all of the exhibits and along with all of the medical records, and they specifically referred to the CT scan, did not refer to the results of the CT scan, but concluded that she had a fractured skull.
Right. Right.
So when we are talking about defamation, because he is a known entity in many households, he is a public figure. So that means that he has an elevated standard that he has to meet for defamation. So he has to show that the defendant told a lie about him to a third party with actual malice, and that it caused reputational harm. And the reputational harm here is something that he doesn't really have to show as much, because he's also going for what's called defamation per se, meaning that it's so reprehensible, the lie is so reprehensible that, you know, if people believe it, it's something that would actually affect his profession, his work, etc. So the actual malice standard means that he has to show that not only the defendant lie about it, but that the defendant lied about it either knowing that it was false or with reckless disregard as to the truth or falsity of the statement. So by saying they knew, they had the medical records, they referred to the CT scan, they didn't, they conveniently ignored this piece that would have shown that all of that was bogus. I think that there is a very decent defamation case against The Athletic, but I'm not sure about Molly Knight, because she's also listed as an individual defendant, and we can talk about that.
Yeah, I don't know. You said she could be separated from this, and she's not there any longer, by the way. And
yeah.
Her tweets are repeated in the document that you're referring to, the tweets, and that's just some of them. I mean, she has made a career out of going after these types of players. I mean, this is not the first time. She says that she was, mentally, she went to Stanford. She's very woke. She went after Aaron Rodgers, saying he had COVID toe. Then he had to go after her. She's gone after Bauer. She's gone after Trump. She contacted, if you read her Mother Jones interview, trying to stop Trump from throwing out the first pitch at numerous baseball, the opening day. I mean, this is not your typical sports writer. This is an activist. And she's since, like you said, left The Athletic. And she says in the Mother Jones interview, she couldn't care less about sports writing any longer. So I look at her as a different person than a regular sports writer from ESPN, which is where she started. ESPN, the magazine, and then she went to The Athletic, which, by the way, The Athletic had a very, very strong paywall as their business model. And the reason this is important is the people who were promoting it all the time, like Ken Rosenthal, who's named in the suit, and the Athletic people who kept promoting it, had to come up with more and more salacious stories, Alita. And I think this is part of their business model. And they eventually, story after story after story by The Athletic was about franchises and sexual workplace problems. This became their main driving salacious way to get you to pay through the paywall. And I think in a lot of ways, it's not a lawsuit. This is just my own observation of The Athletic over the years.
Yeah.
It's not too long. they needed to keep raising the bar because they were hemorrhaging money. And I think she was part of that army of mostly women writers who went after various franchises and various sports month after month after month. This was their main dinner meal at The Athletic, was sexual improprieties in sports franchises.
Yeah, that's an interesting, very interesting insight. I
Yeah.
hadn't really thought about that. Now I know that that was kind of a piece in David Portnoy's lawsuit against oh gosh, who was it that he was suing? I did a whole deep dive on his complaint. Now that one wasn't defamation, but he was talking about how that was, dissemination of private information and that kind of thing.
Right.
And it's kind of similar to this case in some ways because he's talking about, intimate relations to try to keep it
Portnoy,
PG.
the same thing.
Yeah. And so, and then it's like sort of these allegations that come out later that he's essentially, I don't know, preying on younger women. But that was kind of a point that he made too, that although there's this paywall, when you have a headline that is behind a paywall that no one, if you don't bother to, or if you aren't subscribed to it and you have no interest in being subscribed to something, but you see a headline, sometimes you can make a conclusion based on that headline. And that's interesting to see, whether or not the court in that case will be persuaded by that. But here, that's an interesting point, that overall that creates the tendency, or incentivizes, I guess, these writers to make the headline that much more salacious, so that people will be interested enough to buy and whatnot.
Well, it incrementally went up, Alita, over the past couple of years. It started out, who cares about The Athletic? You know what I mean? Why am I going to pay for this? They didn't have any breaking news. Ken Rosenthal would promote the hell out of it on Fox Baseball, and he's a legitimate guy, Ken Rosenthal, with a reputable name. And, I said, okay, but I'm still not going to pay for it. And I noticed over the months, it became more sexualized. It became more defamatory. It became more of a smear sheet. And just so you know, less than 90 days ago, for $550 million, an organization called the New York Times purchased The Athletic. I don't know if you realize that.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Every investor that you talk to, and you could look online, nobody believes in their business model except them. Every single name investor thinks that they're being completely disingenuous with their numbers and model and paywall. They had about 1 million subscribers at their peak, and now they're down to about 600,000. So there's something going on here. But the fact that the New York Times bought them very recently, claiming they're going to be hands off, I find that hard to believe. They want to sink their teeth into this woke sports model that they have all wrapped their arms around, especially at ESPN, where she came out of.
Interesting. So let's talk about the allegations here, where we've kind of referenced the mean tweets, so to speak, but he goes through it in the complaint, and as you go through, as I was reading it, at first I was like, okay, but are these alleged to be defamatory, or the characterization of these tweets, is that alleged to be defamatory, or is this just sort of background? And I think that based on what I was seeing on the actual malice side, I think that what he's trying to show with the characterization of his tweets by The Athletic is that he's trying to say that actual malice is provable not just by the fact that they had the medical records and they referred to the CT scan, but also by the fact that they have every reason to take him out. Not every reason, but they have every incentive to take him out because they just hate him based on their past behavior and the way that they characterize his stuff, that they just will take any opportunity to do that. Which is I think
you're talking about the motivation for The Athletic, or?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to take it a step further and say he's a Trump supporter, and that's why they wanted to take him out.
Okay.
And he smartly leaves that out of the lawsuit. They have
Okay.
made no bones about taking down him and Aaron Rodgers as Trump people. And I
Okay.
think it's hard to ignore that 600-pound gorilla in the room. Whether you're a Trump supporter or not, it's not really relevant. The
Yeah.
point of the matter is he's been very vocal on Twitter politically. Forget about this stuff with the mean girls tweets and everything else. That is not the motivation for taking him down. Believe me, if he was on the other side, this would all have been ignored at ESPN, the magazine.
Interesting. Yeah, because I did not realize that, because you're right. It's not in the complaint at
That's
all
right. But
that
that's smart. I think
that he
that's
was a
very
Trump
smart.
supporter. Well, and
Because if you look at
especially
her tweets, not her being Hill, the woman bringing it, the reason he puts her tweets in there is the permission slip that she's giving him sexually each step of the way, Alita. That's pretty obvious from her tweets what is going on there. I mean, bring it on. I want more, bring the pain, all of her tweets. He puts that in there almost as a permission slip exonerating him.
Yeah. Yeah. But he does go through and talk about how there are articles that are written about him by published by The Athletic and written by Molly Knight is one of the big ones. Ken Rosenthal is another one, but Ken Rosenthal is not named as an actual defendant here.
I noticed that. Yeah, that was interesting.
I thought
was
that
surprised.
I thought that was very interesting too, because he references Ken Rosenthal quite a bit in here.
Yeah. If I may interject, he's the face of the franchise.
Okay.
Ken Rosenthal is the face of The Athletic. Nobody knows any of these other players at The Athletic, except he was hired, or maybe as a part of it. I don't know, but now the New York Times owns it. But I always thought, my opinion was that Ken Rosenthal had a piece of the company.
Ah, okay. Okay. So yeah. So it is interesting that he's not named. That makes it even more interesting that he's not named as a defendant. But it did remark in one small portion that in his articles on this particular issue, on the domestic violence restraining order, when he wrote about it, he wasn't referring specifically to the CT scan. So I wonder if maybe that's where they decided that the link is talking about the CT scan but not talking about the results, because it is possible to tell a lie by implication, right? By omitting certain information that you probably know and that would be helpful to show the actual truth, right? It's not the full truth if you're omitting something that is glaringly obvious like that. But they kind of,
just to interject briefly, the other franchises that ran with the CT scan broken skull story all retracted their stories, been contacted by Trevor Bauer's legal team, retracted, apologized, and or cited The Athletic as the source of their misinformation. So it leaves The Athletic even more vulnerable.
Yeah. Which I mean that
Fox Sports retracted, all the other papers retracted.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which it's as far as the legal claims are concerned, it's not a requirement that they have not retracted, or it doesn't really impact one way or another whether they ultimately retract the statement, because it's making the statement in the first place. But it is interesting that the complaint does go through and say, well, and by the way, when Trevor Bauer's team reached out to The Athletic with this information that conclusively shows, they were like, no, we think that our article was accurately portrayed.
They doubled down.
They did.
But the other sports people said, "Oh, okay, thank you," and they pulled it and retracted it.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you're looking at a CT scan that says I don't have a fractured skull, but they're going to stick to their guns. I mean, what is your legal remedy to that? I ask you, what are you supposed to do when faced with hard evidence to the contrary? You're a public figure, but it's defamatory. I mean, what else are you supposed to do? He's done everything.
From Trevor Bauer's perspective?
Yeah. I mean, what other thing could he have done?
I mean, file a lawsuit, really, because it's, it's trying to get your word out there that combats it, which is hard, because You know, it's not a one-to-one. It's the equivalent of doing a makeup call by the umpire, right?
Right.
If they call or don't call a strike and then later on have a makeup call, it's not exactly a one-to-one remedy. So that's why you kind of have to, in this kind of a case, file a defamation lawsuit if it continues to follow you and it continues to cause harm to you, especially financially. That's usually the case.
Right.
But it's one thing that may come up as a defense from The Athletic is that they are going to bring up his reputation, which is kind of interesting because an argument can also be made that they are at fault for creating a reputation for
Yeah.
him by
Yeah.
crafting his
He
his
says,
social
show me
media.
the tweets. He says repeatedly, show me the tweets that tarnishes my reputation. Show me what I did. And they refuse. And they keep recycling that he has this bad reputation. Well, that's defamatory because you're never showing it.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't get away with that as a journalist. I can't, saying that this guy has a bad reputation. Really? Well, what's the example of that? I don't have any, but everybody knows it. Come on.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said previously, Alabama Pitts was in Sing Sing prison and signed with the Yankees. That's why I mentioned, there have been, examples through baseball where we've overcome even being a convict in a penitentiary. That's why I mentioned Alabama Pitts.
Yeah, no, it's a great. I'm really glad that you did. And if anybody hasn't seen that, be sure to check out the video. It's a great example of how, like you said, of how far things have changed over time, and how this doesn't have to be the standard.
No.
that people have to be, perfect angels, in order to play baseball and, or star in movies or, have whatever job that they have, because we are all humans and we all make mistakes. And sometimes we do things that other people don't like, whether, well, I shouldn't say whether legal or not, but like, generally speaking, where those things are not illegal, but people dislike them. Well, too bad. But anyhow, I think that
my motivation is purely greedy. I want Trevor Bauer in the Dodgers rotation. I have a dog in this hunt. I mean, we lost Max Scherzer. Kershaw's at the end of his career. I need the Cy Young Award winner in my rotation. And the Dodgers have been oddly quiet about this. I believe they would really like this to be resolved in their favor. I mean, they're on the hook for this money, I believe, Alita, that they're guaranteed his contract. I mean, unless there's some clause where they get out of it, I'm not sure how they get out of paying him.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know either. You would know better than me. But I think so. And I will say this too, that in every single case that I talk about, I try to be as unbiased as possible. Obviously I'm showing up with my Kershaw jersey on. So I have every motivation to be supportive of him, in this case too, because, I also want the Dodgers to succeed. I remember when Julio Urias was also placed on administrative leave during that whole thing. And that was painful because that was at a time when we needed him. We didn't have a World Series win since 1988 at that point.
Right.
And we were like just getting there, but so I completely understand, but I will say that I'm still looking at this as objectively as possible. And
you're doing a terrible job of it. Your fan stuff is coming through right through the YouTube computer model. It's coming right at you. God bless you.
Thank you. But I will say that, one thing that I will point out that proves that I'm being objective about this is I think that, for as much as Molly Knight is more of an activist journalist than a typical traditional sports journalist, I think that she's probably going to be dismissed from this lawsuit unless he amends it, because there's one missing link here that I saw that he probably needs in order to keep her in the lawsuit. And it's that he doesn't allege that she herself had access to the domestic violence restraining order with the CT scans and all that kind of stuff. It just says The Athletic had it. There were two employees there that wrote the article. Two other women. I can't remember their names.
I forget their names. Yeah.
Let's see. It's Brittany Giroli and Katie Strang. Those are the two authors of it.
Well,
But
but
so
Molly Knight is tweeting that the woman has a cracked skull. I mean, she tweets
yes.
that repeatedly.
So she tweets that. So he has every single element of defamation alleged except for the actual malice point, which is that he has to show that she herself knew that what she was saying was false, or she had, was recklessly disregarding it. But he hasn't alleged that she herself saw the domestic violence, the package with the medical records and all that stuff.
Right.
That is one point that's missing from there. And maybe that was just an oversight in the drafting. So I would anticipate that she's probably going to file a motion to dismiss for herself so that she can get out of it. And if the court does accept that or grants the dismissal, then what would happen is Trevor Bauer would have the ability to amend it to fix whatever issues are there. So I mean, maybe she ends up staying in the lawsuit anyway, but not without I think a likely motion to dismiss.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, how likely is this suit to be successful? I mean, he's got very deep pockets. Alita. He's got a very good firm. He's got a wonderful African-American woman attorney, Sean Hawley, who I've seen work in the previous cases for him. Very aggressive, very, very sharp.
Yeah.
What are the odds of his success in this particular case?
I think in this one, I've seen based on the allegations and, and if it is true, in fact, that they did have those reports, and
they're public documents. I mean, I could get them right. They're on file.
True.
Right here.
But the fact that they are publicly available is not quite enough for an actual malice standard.
Okay.
Because, so for actual malice to defend in a case where the plaintiff has to show actual malice, the defendant can say, well, there are public records about, XYZ. And so I was relying on that,
Right.
It's a very low standard that you can just say, like, I was relying on, the witness, coming in and telling me this. I was relying on their statement, especially as a journalist. So that could be enough to successfully defend it. But here, so
but they're referring to the CTs in the articles. So, I mean, isn't that an admission that you have the CTs? I mean,
so yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing.
They're looking at them saying there's a cracked skull when clearly there's not.
Yeah. And that's exactly it, is that if they didn't, and I think that that's probably why Ken Rosenthal isn't specifically named in here, is that he doesn't refer to the CT scans, but so he can,
so also, here, if I may interject, Ken Rosenthal is not an activist journalist with a political edge. He has to live with these cats, and he has to go face to face with Trevor Bauer on the field. He's not Molly Knight. He's not Molly Knight. So in defense of Ken Rosenthal, I could see him not being that close to the center of the storm here.
Yeah, I could see that too, I guess, then in that case. Yeah. But I think the fact that they specifically referred to the CT scans is that link that he can hook in actual malice in this case, because otherwise it would be a very tough time. Now, in any kind of a defamation case by a public figure, it's always going to be like, if you were just knowing that a lawsuit was filed, rolling the dice, likelihood, just say probably not going to win because it's so hard to win a defamation case.
Right.
Now, that's not to say that it can't happen. The hip hop artist Cardi B won big recently. That was last month or the month before, against a YouTuber who was making all kinds of crazy accusations about her being a prostitute and a
Cardi B. That's outrageous.
I know.
That's terrible.
I mean, Cardi B has her own reputation,
You're right. You got to keep that intact. I mean, I think she was a virgin up until a week ago. Cardi B.
Of course.
How low are we going to sink as a culture?
But that's to show that even with that kind of a reputation going into the lawsuit, she won. I mean, the jury even gave punitive damages on top of everything because they were so convinced that this YouTuber was awful.
Would an LA jury be in favor of an LA Dodger star pitcher, just generally speaking? I mean, if this was Clayton Kershaw and you brought in 12 jurors with Dodger hats on, I mean, how much better is that for you to do it here than wherever the Athletic is based, the New York Times, for instance, now.
Yeah, it of course is definitely better, in LA than in other places. Now it is in federal court, so that means that the geography that they pull jurors from is a bit wider. So you
Oh,
could
right,
also
right,
get Angels fans.
right. Oh, interesting. But
So
it says right on the door, it says no Giant fans allowed into the
of
courtroom,
course.
right?
Of course, because
Right,
everybody knows that they're just gonna lie about everything, right?
right. Don't
That
even
they obviously exercise poor judgment if they're Giants fans.
right, right. Plus, they might have knives on them or whatever they have. Who knows what these people do up there? Right. Now it's being run by ex-Dodgers, so even Jock Peterson signed with them, by the way,
I
breaking my
know.
heart. It's really
I know.
sad. I don't even see him in that uniform.
I
I'm just
know.
going to start crying and crawl into a fetal position if I see Jock Peterson in a Giant uniform.
I know. I know. I just Jock, if you happen to be watching this for some
Yeah,
reason, on the days that you play against the Dodgers, especially in Chavez Ravine, just call sick. Just call in
just
sick.
call in sick
Just
because
call in
people are
COVID.
going to start weeping. I mean, I don't care that the manager was a Dodger or Fahidi is the GM. I don't really care that much about that. But the fact that Jock Peterson's up
I
there,
know.
oh Lord, that's one of my favorite players.
Yeah,
I mean, I didn't
it
care
was
that he was
sad
on
even.
Atlanta. I was rooting for him on Atlanta,
Yeah.
but now it's you're dead to me.
Well, especially because Atlanta was playing the Houston Asterisks.
Right, right,
So,
right.
I mean, anything, anyone playing against Houston is, in my book, a bump up.
Wow. Yeah.
But yeah. So anyhow, I guess back to this particular lawsuit.
Right.
Um, I mean, I think so the fact that it is in federal court means that the pool could be a bit wider. That was something that I remembered learning in law school about when we were in civil procedure talking about these kind of jurisdictional issues between federal court and state court. We would read all kinds of cases where somebody was trying to get into federal court and would get kicked out. Pete Rose was somebody who was trying
Oh
to,
wow.
I
Okay.
think, get his case kicked out of federal court because he wanted it in state court, because he wanted his loyal fan base to be deciding, as the
Interesting. Oh,
jury.
fascinating.
So
Fascinating.
it was kind of an interesting twist. I remember reading that. I can't remember the name of the case exactly, but I always, that was the reason that always stuck out in my mind of this idea between federal court and state court for the jury pool.
I'll tell you something else about state court. It has a lot of local jurisdiction, like you were saying, and how going back to the thing with Alabama Pitts in the old days, and I mean,
Mhm.
there's been a lot of ownership in Major League Baseball that has been scurrilous over the years, Alita. I can only point to Reggie Jackson as a Yankee, where he said that regarding George Steinbrenner and Billy Martin, one's a pathological liar, the other one's a convicted felon. And George Steinbrenner was a convicted felon. He was convicted of illegal campaign contributions to Richard Nixon. He was,
Wow.
in federal court, absolutely true. Did not
Oh
lose his
no.
friend. Oh, yeah. Great little trivial history. And Reggie pointed that out when he got into his skirmishes with Billy Martin as a Yankee. The point I'm trying to make is the ownership of some of these teams are nebulous to begin with. I take you back to Comiskey, the owner of the White Sox, who forced his players to paint the stadium in the offseason because they were under contract, Alita. They had to take out brushes and paint Comiskey Park with brushes. Their revenge, of course, was the following year, 1919, when they threw the World Series and became the 1919 Chicago Black Sox.
Yep.
With shoeless Joe Jackson hitting .356 and still being banned from baseball for life by Kennesaw Mountain Landis, Judge Landis, the same judge in the Alabama Pitts case. But sometimes the ownership of these teams, and getting back to the Dodgers, I don't know what their relationship is now with Trevor Bauer. Are they secretly using MLB to do their dirty laundry for them, Alita? Do they not want to be the franchise to throw this guy under the bus? Do they want out of this thing? Would they take him back, in your humble opinion?
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. This is not the same organization that we grew up with. This is not Tommy Lasorda's Dodgers anymore.
No.
This front office and the people who work there come out of the motion picture industry. The PR people who run this, as you're well aware of, the people at home may not know this, but it's a revolving door between the motion picture studios and the Dodger front office over the years, more so than ever, in my opinion. But this is not a welcome environment for someone like a Trevor Bauer. I mean, I hate to say it, but he looks more like a giant to me every day. I mean, I don't think they would bat an eye of taking Trevor Bauer. And I point out a similar situation with Aroldis Chapman, the Cuban pitcher. The Dodgers had an opportunity to sign him. He had some gun incident with his girlfriend where a gun went off in a garage. He was cleared by MLB. The Dodgers passed on him, and he signed with the Yankees. They could care less about stuff like that.
Yeah.
He signed with the Cubs, and the rest is history. I mean, he's had a very strong career.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder for the Dodgers whether it's the fan base has has an influence with that. Like who's going to be coming in to buy hot dogs and sit in the seats.
Right. Well, it's also, they tainted him though. I mean, her mission was she literally said was to get the Dodgers not to sign Trevor Bauer.
Yeah.
She made it her life's work. They signed it anyway. She said, I'm too angry to even tweet about this, which is in the lawsuit.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. She basically, had this it does look like she had this long campaign where she was saying he's a terrible person. He harasses women. He, he essentially sicks his entire fan base onto especially female reporters, that criticize him or whatever. And that therefore, essentially she's been trying to get him canceled for a long time.
Yeah.
That's basically it.
Well, baseball, that's why I mentioned these old stories, because it's not just happening in today. I mean, the baseball has a long history of all kinds of union problems, hiring problems, suspension problems, ownership who are criminals. I mean, this is not everybody has clean hands in Major League Baseball.
Right.
If that helps.
And I understand the aspiration of wanting to be an organization that has good people, stand up citizens and whatnot. But I think you can only go so far.
You only go so far, right?
I mean, if you want to have a certain culture of people, I don't know.
Well, let's take an example here. April 15th coming up. What's April 15th? It's opening day, but it's also Jackie Robinson Day.
Mm-hmm.
So Jackie Robinson is obviously a legend for the Dodgers, and they built this image of him as the franchise. Now Major League Baseball has everyone wear number 42, and he's revered as almost a god in baseball. The attempt to get the number for Roberto Clemente retired as a Puerto Rican player has kind of cooled off. And it was an attempt to get his number retired in the same way Jackie Robinson's. I don't know what the status of that particular movement is, but the Jackie Robinson legend is enmeshed in the Dodger folklore, right, Alita?
Yes, of course.
Right. And there's a statue of Jackie Robinson, but they never, in the movie with Boseman, I think his name was. Right?
Yeah, Boseman.
Right.
Chadwick Boseman.
Right. Chadwick Boseman. But they never really tell you the true story of Jackie Robinson, do they? They don't tell you that he was a Republican. They don't tell you that he was conservative. They don't tell you that he backed Nixon. They don't tell you that he worked for Nelson Rockefeller. They don't tell you that he had a column in the Daily News every week, why I support the Vietnam War. None of that is wow is right, lady.
I had no idea.
Right. That's right. And I love Jackie Robinson. But the reality of it is they're making myth out of nothing to sell tickets and to sell jerseys and when you start to mythologize people like this, the myth has to keep protecting the myth. Yeah. You have to keep reinforcing it. You can't let it chip away at what you've built, because the whole house of cards crumbles.
Yeah. And that's the thing that I've been thinking a lot lately about. This is on a completely different subject, but I came across an article that was about, or I guess a journal piece that was about, specifically about military history, but kind of talking about how history mythologizes certain people and certain events and whatnot, and how sometimes that can have some benefits, because you've got, in their case, they were talking about military history, how you've got, young soldiers that can pull from history and say like, oh, like, these are the people that we, that have been here before, and we can be just like them, but on the other hand, then you have other people that are like, well, okay, but that experience does not match mine. I thought this was going to be like that. Like, what the heck is going on?
Right.
But the same thing is true with having, with having people that have become that have become mythologized, that all, are now heroes that that can do no wrong, that, when you leave out certain details that would make them a bit more controversial, I think on the one hand, it really does a disservice to that individual because it doesn't
Yeah.
tell their full story, but it also
Yep.
does a disservice to everybody else
Everybody else.
because he's a
Yeah.
he's a human being
That's right.
just like
That's right.
anybody else with his own opinions, his
Right.
own
It's
thoughts.
fine. I don't mind it. A friend of mine, Oliver Stone's a friend of mine. We did some different projects together as a screenwriter. He wrote a screenplay about Martin Luther King, and he put in warts and all. He was hired by Warner Brothers to do it. The family flipped out that he put in the full-rounded human being, and he said, "You came to Oliver Stone. What did you expect?" And they canceled the project because he made him into a full-fledged human being.
Yeah.
They wanted the myth, and he said, "You want the Hallmark Hall of Fame Oliver Stone writer, not me, who he researched it, wrote a perfectly wonderful script." And, look, I did a piece on Mark Walters, the owner of the Dodgers. He was having an affair with a woman who worked with him at Guggenheim, bought her a house in Malibu. And I was picking it up from other sources. I wasn't the guy who did this. I was picking it up from multiple news sources. And I got a letter from the legendary Marty Singer saying he was going to sue me for defamation of this woman who was his client. And I said, I'm merely picking it up from the New York Post, the Daily Mail, and 50 other publications. And he cited some obscure law that you probably know better than me, that repeating an article is not protection for the writer. Repeating someone else's work is not any protection.
Technically, it can be. It's a republication of the lie.
Of the lie.
But you still would have to show actual malice on your part, because
which there was none on my part. I was fired over this, and this was the famous Marty Singer letter. He's obviously one of the biggest lawyers in Hollywood, Tom Cruise's attorney and others. So I was, Robert Barnes is happy that I got a Marty Singer letter. I'm his hero now. And Barnes would love this lawsuit, by the way, because it reads so well, and it allows someone, a layman like me, to read a clean narrative. Alita,
yes.
Does that seem correct?
Yeah, I think so too. I definitely agree.
Yeah.
I think he really lays out the history.
Yeah.
And the background, the context. I mean, for anybody that's sort of coming in new to this, other than the detail about his Trump support, but that's the one thing that he leaves out. But is it relevant?
It's not relevant
to the lawsuit? Not exactly.
No,
so
not
I
exactly.
mean, he talks about them, sort of playing up this idea that he harasses women, and that therefore it's unsurprising, according to Molly Knight, later on, after all of this is done, that she says it's unsurprising that there are allegations against him for physical assault of a woman in the bedroom, because of his verbal harassment, quote unquote, on Twitter. But
she also has the famous quote where she says, no woman gives permission for a cracked skull.
Yes.
Words to that effect, right?
Yes. Yeah. Something like that.
Right. There's no permission for a cracked skull. That really jumps out.
It does. Which, I mean, okay,
wow.
But the court said that there were no injuries. And that's another thing that the lawsuit, that the complaint goes through also, is also their characterization, or rather mischaracterization, of the court's findings. Mm-hmm. Now, the court, in the hearing on the domestic violence restraining order, said that, number one, that there wasn't any sort of violence between them, and number two, that they didn't anticipate there being anything, moving forward. So she didn't really meet the low standard, according to the DA, right? He said that it's a very low standard for getting a domestic violence restraining order,
your audience,
which is true.
Sorry to interrupt, but your audience would like to know that this was originally in the investigation by the Pasadena police force that had her wear a wire. I don't know if you realize that she wore a wire as per installation by Pasadena police, and still nothing materialized with the wire. And then that was turned over to the DA in LA. So the case originated with Pasadena PD because he lived in Pasadena. And still the Pasadena police turned it over to Gasson in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Just to interject that.
Yeah. For sure. But the Athletic, they basically conveniently ignored the central findings of the hearing and said something about like, oh, they brushed it off like, oh, well, this isn't, it's not a hearing to determine whether or not something actually happened. It's a determination to figure out whether or not something in the future might happen, which
Right.
in order to do that, you have to first figure out whether something has happened.
Right. That's right. I forgot about that. That's right. Now, also, I don't know, you may know this better than me. Do the Athletics' legal pockets become deeper now that they're owned by the New York Times?
Probably.
Yeah. Which
Probably.
happened just in January, just now, $550 million purchase.
Yeah, which
Against Wall Street's better judgment. They, according to all the Wall Street experts, saying they were ridiculous to buy this thing.
yeah, which means that there's I mean, that might actually be better for Trevor Bauer because if you
I
go
know.
against a defendant that has no money,
Oh, on the brink of bankruptcy, I would suggest to you with a plummeting subscription base, there's really no there. If you look at it, there's no hard copy magazine. There's just a website. I mean, think about what you're suing. You're suing a bunch of stringers who say, I'm in Detroit covering the Tigers. I'm just a guy in my underwear covering the Tigers. Molly Knight is married with kids. I mean, who is the Athletic? What is the Athletic? You know what I mean? It's just an idea.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, why the investors were saying the purchase by the Times made no sense. But at $550 million, it's chump change to the Times.
I guess so. And maybe if they can turn it into something. Well, let me get some super chats here because we got some here earlier.
Super chat.
2012 Jameson says her legal takes better than her culinary takes. This is referring to my post yesterday of an In-N-Out burger, which I was very happy to have.
I saw that. Wow, they don't have In-N-Out burger where you go, right? It's just right here.
Yeah, definitely
sad,
not.
Very sad.
But it's always one of those things that I either get In-N-Out, either like at the one right outside LAX or the one just down like a little bit further south off the 405. But
not
anyhow,
to be controversial, but I prefer Fat Burger.
Oh, really?
Oh, really? That's right.
I don't know that I've actually ever had Fat Burger.
You might want to try Fat Burger.
Okay, but I mean, nothing will ever.
I've tried, baby. I've gone through my phases with In-N-Out burger, but at the end of the day, I'm a Fat Burger man.
Okay. I'll have to try it, but I will say that nothing will ever take me away from an In-N-Out burger. I know that when I went to law school in Texas, and at that time, that was when they were just expanding to Austin, Texas. And so there were a lot of locals that were screaming and shouting about Whataburger. And I had it once and I was like, nah, I'm really happy that In-N-Out is coming.
All right.
So, but I will try Fat Burger for sure.
Right on.
Zachary Moss says, as a Braves fan, you already know Bites, Braves in 6. Wait, you took another X in Kimberly, make it 5.
No.
Okay. Rude. Andy the Game Maker says, Legalbytes has a bigger haircut budget than Frank McCourt.
That's funny.
I think probably not, though. This is also my brother, by the way.
Andy, cheap shot. The Frank McCourt, don't forget his wife, who had David Boies as her attorney during the lawsuit. I remember covering that, and she was going to run for president. She had hired Hillary Clinton's ex-campaign manager.
Wow.
Oh, no. So there's a politicized underbelly to the Dodgers for a long time, Alita. She made such a mess of this franchise. She would bring in Andre Ethier to run yoga on his day off on the field for her lady friends from Malibu.
No, I didn't hear about that.
She painted all the seats that yellow, the lemon yellow, and then Juan Pierre couldn't see the ball in this because of the seats, so she had to paint them back the other way. Jamie McCourt almost single-handedly took down this franchise. So I despise her more than Frank McCourt, just so you know.
Wow, I didn't know any of that. I knew that there was a lot of. I knew that their divorce, like the Dodgers suffered tremendously during as a result of their contentious divorce.
I originally found her in the hallway of the stadium with the Pillsbury Doughboy heir. I had encountered her months before the divorce, canoodling with him in a runway at Dodger Stadium. And that was what gave me the lead and the tip off that this was not going to end well for the Frank and Jamie McCourts.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. 2012 Jameson says it demonizes and lionizes history as history, talking about, you know, how we create these myths and heroes in history. I think absolutely that's correct.
Right.
Andy the Game Maker, Legalbytes, which is more precious to you, your signed Daryl Strawberry photo or your signed Frank McCourt photo? I have neither.
I have neither. Yeah, I don't have either one.
You know that.
Yeah, that's weird.
But I did like Daryl Strawberry when I was little, mostly because his last name was Strawberry.
Right.
But yeah, he was one of my favorite Dodgers growing up. But yeah, anyhow. Well, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me. Is there
Oh yeah, this is a lot of fun. Just, you know, talking law and sports. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know who covers. Is there a channel that just does law and sports? We should start a channel that does law and sports. Combine the two subjects. I mean, no one's ever done that. There's plenty of these lawsuits. I mean,
absolutely.
He also sued Deadspin, by the way, which we didn't get into. Trevor Bauer.
Yeah, that's a separate lawsuit.
That's a separate lawsuit. That's another episode.
Okay.
We get into that one at another time. Just so you know, Jackie Robinson Day coming up tomorrow. We're doing a special on the Martin Luther King assassination. Who was James Earl Ray on America's Untold Stories?
Okay.
Myself and Eric Hunley, which is a big show for us tomorrow. Today being the anniversary, the 4th of April, 1968, where King is killed. So we're going to do an episode on that. And I recommend the Alabama Pits episode. I also have an episode, which you would like, about Jackie Mitchell, the female pitcher who struck out Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig in North Carolina.
Oh.
It's on our website, it's on our channel, Little Jackie Mitchell. She learned a screwball from Smokey Burgess, who was a Brooklyn Dodger pitcher who lived in North Carolina, and she became a phenomenal left-handed screwball pitcher who struck out, and there's video footage in the episode of her striking out Babe Ruth, and then she faced Lou Gehrig and struck him out also.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah, okay. Jackie Mitchell. Check it out on America's Untold Stories.
I've got to find that.
Yeah, no, you'll love both of them. They're both great baseball stories.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, yeah, this has been great. I can't wait to have you back for another episode, either on this lawsuit, maybe the Deadspin lawsuit, maybe other sports and law stories. I'm all about
combine the two. I mean, there's a long, like I said, I just gave you some hints of some of them. I mean, there's tons more legal stuff with baseball and law combined and other sports, you know, but I'm specifically about baseball. There's quite a bit out there in the history of the game, you know, lawsuits and you know, like we talked about here.
Yeah, for sure. Well, anyhow, this has been great. And so for anybody else that wants to check you out, obviously, America's Untold Stories is linked below in the description, along with that video that we've been referencing as well. And then where else can people find you?
You can follow me at Lord Buckley on Twitter if you care to engage in that crazy crap. I'm on there talking about everything on the earth. So that's fun. And then America's Untold Stories with Eric Hunley, which we do Tuesdays and Fridays. We've been covering the legal aspects of the Baldwin case now for it seems like 10 years, but we have so many sources that give us information that it's even was cited in the LA Times as the source of the LA Times, which I thought was crazy. The LA Times was citing America's Untold Stories as their source of Baldwin information, as crazy as that sounds, you know.
I did not realize that. That's awesome. Yeah, I know you guys have been talking about that quite a bit, and it's been the level of detail. If anybody is interested, I know that I've talked about it quite a bit on my channel too, but not nearly as much as you guys have. And that's been a crazy ride too. But if anybody hasn't seen the America's Untold Stories coverage of it, it's very detailed.
Yeah, we have fun with it. You know, I'm considered a Hollywood insider because I've lived in Hollywood, where I am right now, for 30 years. But originally from Brooklyn, as indicated by the hat. You know, of
course.
But I've been here a long time, so some people tell me things, you know, for no reason, and then somehow we weave them into the show when it becomes an episode. But yeah, so America's Untold Stories tomorrow, Martin Luther King, James Earl Ray. And then on Friday, we usually have a fun Friday doing stuff on Baldwin, or one of my personal crazy stories, how I got involved with whatever I got involved with. You know.
one of your many lives that you've
My
lived.
many lives. Yeah.
Sounds great. All right. Well, with that, I guess we will say goodbye, and I'll see you guys in the next video.